Well, what are your expectations when you paint, specifically with watercolor? If you're learning, you might want to check those expectations at the door. Now, if you've been around this channel long enough, you know I love spontaneous painting, but mainly for what it teaches you. Watercolor is not a medium that's easy to force, and I'm going to suggest that you check your expectations at the door when you paint with watercolor and just see what it'll do for you. Well, hello there, minders. Welcome back to another Mind of Watercolor. Glad you could join me. And what I'm doing here is just another big sort of wet in wet spontaneous painting, again, for the purposes of putting these auto stretchers through their paces. And this is the larger one. This is not the smaller one I had shown before. So this is as much for my information as for yours. These stretchers have sat around for a while, and I want to get some use out of them and just see how useful they are. So that said, I have pre-wet this entire piece of paper completely, totally wet. And I'm just doing some wet and wet. And here with some ultramarine blue and a little bit of Payne's gray mixed in. I like cascading compositions sometimes, and I thought I would do something like this. This is intended not to have any sky, and it's planned in that way. And I'm just turning this piece so that I get flow in different directions. Spontaneous painting, as I've mentioned many times on this channel, is a great teacher. I mean, it is probably the best teacher I've ever had. So that importance can't be underemphasized. You know, when I see what watercolor does without any expectations and without any demands on it, until I get to really the tight details, I learn so much. I learn if there's something I can use again in the future, because of course you will do and should do paintings that are very carefully planned. But here's the thing I think most important about spontaneous painting, really even planned paintings that have spontaneous passages, and I'll always try to include some sort of spontaneity in each painting. The important thing is check your expectations at the door. One of the biggest problems in overworking watercolor is trying to force it to do something that you had in your mind's eye, but you're not seeing it on the paper. You're just better off maybe to start over. Check your expectations at the door. Let watercolor surprise you. Let it show you what it can do, and then take what you're seeing. Look at what's happening on the paper, what the washes are doing, and roll with it. Revise your plan, revise your ideas. Just say, okay, what I had envisioned is not going to work. Let's go with what I see. Now, this was exciting to me on this particular piece because I live very close to the Appalachian Mountains. We're in upstate South Carolina. So the Appalachians in this part of the country, often referred to as the Smoky Mountains. We're only about an hour and a half from Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and a lot of the Smokies and Appalachian foothills start in South Carolina. So I'm very familiar with these scenes that look like the mountains are on fire. It looks like there's smoke rising out of the gullies. And this is what I was presented with in this piece. This is what the washes look like. I thought, oh, cool. This looks like the Appalachian Mountains I'm so familiar with. When I look at a mountainside and see all that fog and mist rising, that looks like smoke. Cool. Go with it. It's not what I planned, but I'm good with it. And all that granulation. Look at all that granulation in the ultramarine blue. That may not be the most preferred thing for clouds. Maybe you want something softer, less granular, but to me it was perfect for a mountainside of trees and vegetation that was shrouded in mist. And in the hills and mountains around here, you get a lot of rocky outcrops. So I thought, well, the lower part of this piece, I'm just going to add a lot of these little rock fall or rocky outcroppings and see what I get. Now I did plan a little bit more of a distinctive tree. That tree turned out a little more generic than I wanted. It's not a big deal. I was hoping to maybe add a tree or like a major tree that had a little more character to it. But in the end, I went with it and just went with a grouping. But at this point, I'm looking at this and saying, Okay, I want to get that piece to look like I'm going to partner with watercolor and get it to look like the side of a mountain. I'm going to have little hints of trees going up that mountainside. And you're going to see that as I start to real subtly put in some hints and impressions of that in the mist. None of this was really planned. You know, and the thing is you can take spontaneous paintings. You can take paintings where you kind of thrown your expectations to the wind. Let the results that watercolor is coming up with or suggesting to you, and use those maybe in a later painting that is more planned. When I say I have learned more through this kind of painting than in any other way, I am serious, and it has helped me when I go to do something that is more tightly planned, more drawn out, more structured. It's because I know better how to partner with watercolor. So when I say spontaneous painting is one of my best teachers, it's just cannot be overstated. And you've heard me say it in past videos, you're going to hear me say it in others. A lot of the rocks in the rock fall, I decided to add texture through spattering, and a lot of those rocks were lifted. These are not heavily staining paints. I'm using only like 3 or 4 colors. I'm using a Phthalo Turquoise. These are my Mary Blue paints. I'm using Dragon's Blood, which is very similar to red iron oxide. Using, of course, Ultramarine Blue. I'm using a lot of Payne's Gray. So in the end, we have maybe 4 or 5 colors. I think there's some Phthalo Green. I had a tremendous time, a lot of fun rendering those rocks and that rock fall down there, sort of to add a base. Now I decided to add some light glints through the trees. You can see over just to the right, there are some that naturally occurred where paint did not spread. Wet and wet, sort of dry white areas. I thought I like that, so I'm going to add some. So this is a white ink, a white Royal Talons ink, and I'll have, of course, all the supplies listed below as usual. And I didn't have to do a whole lot. I just sort of lifted out a few highlights, added some dark recesses in areas just to kind of fill in those forms, and we're done with it. Now here, these last little tweaks here, I decided I wanted to push some mist through the base of some of these trees on the left. So that's what you're seeing here. This is gouache, not ink. This is gouache and a little bit of a wet in wet method. And I thought it'd be cool just to look like that mist was seeping through those trees a little bit. Really had a lot of fun with it. Next time you do some spontaneous painting, check those expectations at the door. Let watercolor surprise and delight you. We'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.